The last 3 weeks has been a nightmare for me. 3 months ago, I separated from my wife temporarily because I found out she sent a photo of herself in bikini to her male work colleague. It all started when I found an explicit full frontal picture of her while she was scrolling through her phone. We were watching TV. She thought I couldn't see her screen, but I saw the reflection on the living room glass table. I confronted her about it, and after I searched through her phone messenger, I found out that she sent a bikini photo to her work colleague. She argued that she didn't send the explicit frontal to anybody, but I didn't believe her because of previous egregious lies she told me earlier in our relationship. She claimed that the bikini photo was the same photos that were on her Instagram page, so it was already public. I later took her back after some time apart, only to find out that it was worse than I thought. It wasn't just a bikini photo. She sent a lot more than that. Not just to one coworker, but two. And also, she went on her knees on one of them in the men's bathroom at work, but wouldn't admit to going further than that. I even went as far as hiring a private investigator, but she was good at covering her tracks. I am a software engineer, and I was able to hack her work email to gain access to all her instant messages at work and even retrieve some of her deleted messages. This is a story of the nightmare that my wayward wife put me through during our 4 years of marriage. For most of the marriage, we didn't argue much, except for her bad spending habits. I make a lot of money as a software engineer, but I couldn't save much because she was always in a hurry to run up my credit card bills. Besides the spending, overall, we got along well because she was good at manipulating and deceiving me. Come to find out, she has been trickle-throating me and has been lying to me even before we got married. I decided to write this long post to vent and get help from people who have experienced something similar. Just a little background about us. I am 32 and she just turned 28. We were introduced by a mutual friend about 5 years ago during a birthday that I was invited to. I am originally from a small town in East Texas, but I live in Dallas. I came visiting my family in East Texas, during which I was invited to a birthday party. Back then, she was 24, hot brunette, 5'8" inches tall, slim, and really nice figure. One of the most attractive girls I have ever seen. She was indeed my dream girl. She seemed very outgoing, and lots of people know her. Lots of people were around, chatting with her and her gorgeous friends. I was standing across the corner. We crossed paths a couple of times, and our eyes meet a couple of times. I should have walked up to her and start a conversation, but I didn't have the confidence to approach her because she was surrounded by her friends. I spent the entire time at the party thinking about how to approach her before it was time to leave the birthday party. I saw one of my friends that knew who she was because they graduated from the same college. They attended school together. I asked for an introduction. My friend was 2 years younger than me, so I graduated ahead of him. Most of the people in the party went to the same school. I am older than most of them. I asked my friend if he could introduce me to her, and he agreed. Long story short, we exchanged numbers and started texting each other the following day. My friend that introduced me to her didn't tell me much about her, other than she was a popular girl at school, and that I was lucky she was single because every guy in school wanted her, but he didn't recall her having a serious boyfriend. In hindsight, I should have asked my friend more questions about that, instead of feeling lucky that she was interested in me. The icing on the cake is that she is well educated. She has a postgraduate degree, even though it was merely a master's of arts in teaching, which shouldn't have been that challenging, considering her school was a lower tier college. But that was enough to convince myself that she had both brains and brawn, enough to qualify for a wifey material. We got into a relationship a few months after we met. I know this is not an excuse, but I was sort of a loner and didn't date much in my 20s, so I fell heads over heels in love for any attractive girl that showed interest in me and willing to walk down the aisle without knowing her last name. The relationship was going so well that we decided to get married 4 months after we met. Going back, before I met her at the birthday party, she had already graduated. She was working 2 jobs, one at the local high school as a bartender at a local nightclub. She said she was making 5 times more as a bartender than she was making as a teacher, but she likes working with kids. At least, that was what she told me. At the time, I was a software engineer, making good money, so it didn't make sense for her to be working 2 jobs after we got married. She said she was making more as a part-time bartender. than she makes as a school teacher. I should have inquired more about how she made her money, but I guess any normal person would assume that she did what bartenders did. And as an attractive woman, she wouldn't have any problem getting enormous tips from guys. Being in a relationship with her elevated my confidence and boosted my ego. I was with a hot girl every man wanted, I used to say to myself. I told her before we got married that I wanted a large family because I was the only child and I always wanted siblings growing up. She agreed and she said she wanted a large family as well. We agreed that after we got married, she would be a stay-at-home mom, and since she likes working with kids, she would be good at being a mom. I was young and making more money than I know what to do with, so I had a lot of money in my savings accounts. But after we got married, it became a struggle to save. She bled me dry. She was spending money faster than I could make it. She went into a relationship with me knowing that I wanted a big family, which is one of the reasons why I was in a hurry to dive into marriage with her. And I didn't take the requisite time necessary to do my due diligence. The first big shock came 18 months after we got married. My wife hasn't conceived yet, even though we have excess at least 3 times a week. At first, I thought it was all my fault. The tension about her not being able to conceive was in the air, but we didn't talk about it, at least not yet, but we continued trying. It was an obvious conversation to have, especially when she knew I wanted a big family. But at that time, neither one of us would talk about it. I would go to places with her and watch as she would fall over other people's kids, or when friends would come over with their kids and she would play and babysit them. I thought I was the problem. I thought I was inadequate and maybe she hadn't brought it up because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. She didn't seem to be worried as I was and spent most of her time shopping, spending my money, and going on trips with her friends. Sometimes she would use my money to pay for her friend's trip without my knowledge. I complained about her spending because she was spending faster than I was making and putting it on my credit card. Up until that point, the only argument we have had in our relationship was about money. It all culminated one day. I felt like I have had enough of all her spending habits because I felt like all my hard-earned money ever since I got married goes to paying bills and pay off credit cards and nothing to show for it except for a $450,000 house that I paid off soon after we got married. And all I get in return was excess, bills, and no kids. I blew up on her one day when I was paying off my bills at the beginning of the month. I demanded some answers on the expenses from her. She became defensive, blaming me, saying that I wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom. Otherwise, she would have had money of her own. I lost my temper and responded that a stay-at-home mom requires her to be a mom and have kids, and she hasn't done that. She replied by saying that it wasn't her fault that I wasn't man enough to impregnate her. That was the first time our fertility problems boiled to the surface. Before that, it never came up in our conversation, and it didn't come out in the best way. And that was 18 months into our marriage. She was basically accusing me of being the reason why she hasn't gotten pregnant. I felt an overwhelming feeling of sadness and insecurity about that. She won the argument that day, like always. All I could think about was finding a doctor and figuring out what was wrong with me. The following day, I scheduled a doctor's appointment to see the doctor the following week. When I went to the doctor's office the following week, I had a general physical examination. I was asked many questions, from my medical history to how often I was intimate with my wife. Then semen samples were taken and sent to a lab to measure the sperm presence and look for any abnormalities, sperm counts, and etc. I didn't tell my wife that I went to the doctor to check myself. I felt like I was alone in this. I assumed she had already done the same, which was why she had the confidence to question my manhood and accuse me of being the reason why she couldn't conceive. At the time, I felt like she didn't want to hurt my feelings. That was why she hadn't brought it up. In hindsight, I should have known better. Our relationship had always been peaceful up until that point. Our arguments used to be just about money. Our conversations were without depth, mostly surface level, centering around attraction and infatuation on my part. So it wasn't unusual for me and her to bottle things up. More reason why I assumed she didn't want to bring up our fertility problems. Maybe she didn't want me to get hurt, I thought, because she knows that I didn't want to adopt or go by other unnatural means to conceive. So she decided to just keep it quiet until that very day when I brought it up. When I went back to the doctor the following week after the test, I was nervous. I thought they were going to find something wrong with me. Fortunately, I had a clean bill of health, and the doctor recommended that I schedule an appointment together with my wife. I scheduled a date to come back with my wife without thinking twice because I thought she would be happy to take care of this issue once and for all because I knew how much she loved kids. That evening, I went home to my wife, happy. I wanted the results to be a surprise. However, when I went home and showed the result to her, she didn't seem too excited for us. The look on her face gave her the impression that I was accusing her of being the problem, but I didn't see it that way. My logic at the time was that I was ready to explore other unnatural means at that point. Me and the doctor spoke at length about it at his office that day. I was approaching 30, and I had imagined at least 3 kids by then, but I haven't even started. Even if she was the problem, I am sure there's nothing modern medicine couldn't fix, and I can work hard enough to afford it. She agreed to come to the doctor's appointment with me. On the day of the appointment, I remember that I was waiting for her to come home so we can drive to the hospital together. But she called me a few minutes before our drive to the appointment, saying that she was stuck in traffic and hadn't finished all her errands yet. I didn't think she would make it to the appointment in time. I was baffled because I had been looking forward to this appointment for the past few days, and I would be remiss if a traffic or a few minor errands would hamper my effort to repopulate the earth or stop me from finally finding the root cause of our fertility issues. I figured it was already late, and by the time she returns, it would be late to make it to the doctor's appointment. So I called in and rescheduled another meeting. Fast forward a few days later. She was fully aware of the rescheduled appointment. She said she would meet me at the doctor's office, but never showed up. I called her phone several times, but her phone was switched off. I was even afraid that something had happened to her. However, she called me a few hours later when the scheduled appointment had long passed, and she was apologizing that she forgot about the appointment and her phone died. At that point, I didn't have any reason to doubt my wife or think she was hiding something from me. But after the third time, when I scheduled another appointment and she called the doctor's office and canceled without telling me, then I suspected that she was hiding something from me. That evening, I sat her down and questioned her about all the excuses that she has been coming up with to prevent us from seeing a fertility specialist together, and how she continued to lie and hide things from me. I asked her if there was a reason why she didn't want to attend the appointment. She responded like she always does, which is to go on the defense, accusing me of pressuring her. This time, I pushed back and told her that she was deflecting and avoiding every attempt to address this issue. I told her that before we got married, she was fully aware that I wanted a big family, and if she doesn't want to have kids for any reason, then she shouldn't have accepted my hand in marriage. I told her that if she refused to have kids and I want kids, then our goal is not aligned and it's best that we dissolve the marriage. When she realized that I meant what I said, she broke down and started crying, saying that I don't love her and I don't care about her. I was stupid enough at the time to fall for her fake tears, like always. I started comforting my wife because I loved her and I hate to see her cry. But at the back of my mind, I knew something was wrong. I know she was manipulating me, and it bothered me because it didn't make any sense to me, and I couldn't bring it up without her crying. It bothered me so much that our relationship started becoming strained. I slowly started losing interest in the marriage, unintentionally ignoring her and not wanting to attend the same activities as her, and my mood generally deteriorated when I was around her. She noticed that I was ignoring her and zoning out during our conversation and when I'm with her. I was depressed that I couldn't bring up the issue that is important to me without her crying, and I can't imagine getting old without having kids. I was imagining how perfect it would be for her to be the mother of my children, and knowing that there was something that she was hiding from me was heartbreaking. And worst of it is that we couldn't talk about it. Right about that time, I received a very lucrative job offer in Arizona, and it will require me to move out of state. Although the job is partly remote, it will require me to visit the office occasionally. I have to sell my house and buy a new one in Arizona. The only problem is that my wife has a lot of roots in the Texas area. All her family lived around the area, and she refused to leave. She only accepted when I promised that we will fly to Texas often to visit, and we are only going to stay in Arizona for 5 years. And if she doesn't like it, we will move to wherever place she wanted, and I would look for a job wherever she picked. Despite that, she still wasn't happy about abandoning her friends. The move definitely added an additional wrinkle to our marriage. It took us about 3 months to move, buy a house, and settle at our new home in Arizona. After we settled, it didn't take long for me to start thinking about the fertility issue, and I can't keep bottling things up. I had to get to the bottom of this, or else I would live the rest of my life not having or knowing why I didn't have any children. I went searching for the friend that introduced us together a few years ago at the birthday party to get more information about my wife's background. I called his number, but he had changed it. I reached out to him on Facebook, sent him a message on Facebook, and it didn't take long for him to reply with his new number. I called him. After some small talk, I started asking him about my wife in college. He was surprised that I was asking him about my wife and found that amusing, but didn't hold back on anything. I asked him how my wife was in college and who she dated. He told me that my wife didn't have a boyfriend in college that he knows of. He said she was a bottle service girl at the local nightclub. In college, she acted like she was too hot for school, and most guys couldn't handle her. She drove nice cars and a little above their league. She stayed at a nice apartment and was dating rich older men casually. The story doesn't align with what my wife told me. She told me that she was a bartender in college. Now, a friend that knew her and went to school with her is saying something different. I never heard that part of her life. I told my friend that my wife told me that she was a bartender, and he said that may be true, but whenever he went to the club she works at, he only saw her as a bottle girl, and his friends could confirm that. I thanked my friend and told him that I would call him if I have any more questions. When I got off the phone, I remember my wife telling me that she only had one long-time boyfriend in college, and she broke up with him before he cheated on her. However, according to my friend that I spoke with on the phone, my wife was never in a long-term relationship that he knows about. She was a bottle girl in college, working at a nightclub while she went to school. Although this seemed like it had nothing to do with our fertility problem, it was a big part of her life that she failed to tell me about. The truth is that I'm not sure if my decision to carry on with the relationship would have been different if she had told me that she was a bottle girl, because I see bottle girls as one step above strippers. Why I don't want to make judgments about people's profession, and if there was nothing to hide, then why didn't she tell me about it? I feel like people should be honest, especially when they're getting into a relationship with somebody. First, she told me that she was a bartender, and it turns out that it may not be true. She was just a bottle girl. Then she lied to me that she wanted kids, and now that we are married, it turns out that it didn't seem like she wanted to have children. She had basically wasted years of my life. During the past few weeks, our relationship has been strained, so it boiled over when I confronted her about her being a bottle girl and not telling me about it, and also lying to me that she wanted children. We had a big fight that night, and I left the house for a few days. She claimed that there is no difference between being a bottle girl and a bartender, and that she did both, and also still accused me of being the one responsible for her pregnancy issues, even though she was the one making every excuses not to attend the doctor's appointment. I didn't come back to the house for a few days because I wanted to clear my head. During those 2 days, I went to see a lawyer to weigh my options for divorce. Please click the thumbnail on the left-hand corner of this video for part 2.